Hello and welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsberger. I've got my father, Alan Huntsberger, in the studio, and we're going to start off with our foundational verse every single program like we always do. The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord. For he laid its foundation on the seas and established it on the rivers. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. Dad, why do we say that verse all the time when we're in a world where everyone wants to take claim to the world and tell everybody else what to do?
Yeah. Well, the problem is that they could go ahead and try, right?
And they are.
In some ways they'll succeed for momentary. But overall, you know, the Lord is going to have his final say. I mean, there was times that Pharaoh was in charge of the people of Israel, the Israeli people, and then of course God interceded with Moses, and they got back to God. There's always this flip and flop back and forth throughout the course of history. And, you know, the sad thing about how this affects us today is called freedom and truth. And what gives us freedom and truth is God. Because when he created us, he gave us choice right from the Garden of Eden. You can have all the fruit from all the trees except one. And if you touch that one, you're going to die. And of course, that was important. Not that God didn't know what was going to happen. Of course, he knew that man was going to touch that tree, but and he knew what was going to happen. But he did it so that we choose to love him freely.
Yeah.
We choose to obey him freely. It's not mandated to us to serve God. It's not, determined by some legislative law to follow God. It's a choice, and he's given us that freedom, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's good. Let's get on with our guest. We're excited to have him. We haven't had him for a while, but he's back. Dr. Roger, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate you.
It's my pleasure to be with you again. You've got a great show.
Thank you, sir.
Well, it's worldwide now, by the way, sir. You know, you were
Wow.
one of the ones that came on in the very beginning, and we, went one week or 1 day a week to start off in Canada. Then we went weekly, and then here in February we started 1 week or one show once a week in the United States. And in the United States, that goes around the world.
Dad, just tell the story how with Dr. Roger, how we got hooked up and how you're the one that started this all, man.
Yeah. Well, he and Dr. Moudry were doctors who had well respect in the province of Alberta and across Canada and really around the world in all their things that they did. And when COVID first started, they basically said, this is just almost like the common flu, give people vitamin D, don't do a bunch of closing down schools and all that kind of stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And they had a news conference set up, with the microphone and the table and everything else. And not one mainstream media showed up, and not one of them told the story of what these guys wanted to get out. The interesting thing is what Dr. Hodkinson and Dr. Moudry had said was all true. And of course, what's happening now 4 years later is proven that what they said 4 years ago was true. And we decided
it was actually understated at the time.
Exactly. And so in the meantime, we have gone through all this rigmarole, and all kinds of people have got injured, and people are still getting injured in today's world because of the lies and the profiteering that has gone on in the big pharma and all this kind of stuff. And of course, if they just would have listened to you, Dr. Roger, it would have been a lot easier, right?
Well, nonetheless, I think standing up as the first doctor in Canada gave comfort to a lot of people who in their gut knew that what I was saying was right, but they did not have any way of confirming it. And I've received those that thank you so many times over the last 4 years. I can't count.
Good.
Giving comfort to people is very important, even if you can't totally protect them.
Good.
Now, 4 years later, when you release the hornets out of the jar, you can't put them back in the jar because they are all over the place. You are starting to see truth come out that proves you were correct. Now, the ex-CDC director said something. I'm going to go ahead and let you talk about that because it's now justified of what you were talking about.
Yes, this is terribly important. The very ex director of CDC, Dr. David Robert Redfield, has just gone public saying this, in essence, and the paraphrase is reasonably accurate, that long COVID is not due to ongoing infection with the COVID virus. It is due to vaccine injuries of various types. I can elaborate on that later, but this is absolutely staggering to hear that statement come out of a fellow who was the top guy at the CDC when all this was happening.
Yeah.
That's an
Crazy.
enormous statement. There was no plausibility for ongoing infection as the cause of long COVID, which has a characteristic cause of brain. The characteristic cause of brain fog and fatigue is lack of energy. And he is postulating that the real ultimate cause of long COVID complaints, brain fog and fatigue, is an attack on the energy producing part of the cell called mitochondria that have their own DNA that may well have had permanent incorporation of the RNA in the vax, permanently altering the DNA that's present in mitochondria. And mitochondria are, of course, the energy powerhouse of the cell. So the whole thing has plausibility, whereas the previous theory, which was to get them off the hook, of course, it's not the vax, of course, it's just that you have an ongoing virus infection. It had no plausibility. And here we have Redford saying the truth. His idea of it being an attack on mitochondria has yet to be proven. We are waiting for similar confirmation of incorporation of the RNA into DNA. Dr. David Speaker, a Canadian researcher who you probably have heard of in Ontario, he is currently looking at the incorporation of the RNA in the vax permanently into the DNA of spermatozoa. Translation: if he can show that to have happened, that means potentially following fertilization with a changed spermatozoon, that means the potential, hold yourself, for transgenerational, forever and ever, children to children, permanent change in the human genome. Have I got your attention yet? This is the biggest research that would ever have happened in medical history, and it will be a Nobel Prize. It is staggering in its implications, because if it's shown to be the case, and we know that 8% of our genome is viral in origin from our evolutionary history. They've managed to get into us permanently. We know that. We also know from work at MIT in Massachusetts and at the University of Lund in Sweden independently, they have shown that incorporation of the mRNA into DNA in a petri dish, not in vivo, as Speaker is trying, they have shown that that happens. If that's not bad enough, the real issue is we don't know what it will do. It might take 10 or 20 years for the true consequences to be revealed in terms of fertility, in terms of turbo cancers, in terms of anything and everything that the vax has been causing. A tsunami, potentially, of dementia and heart failure because of the random attack on capillaries getting thrombosed. which is one of the mechanisms of action of the vaccine injuries. If you knock off randomly cells that don't reproduce, and I'm talking about the brain and the heart, that is the reserve that we require to delay the onset of heart failure and dementia, which would be inevitable with old age. If you destroy that reserve, you feel perfectly well. You don't know it's been destroyed. But if you destroy that reserve, we are anticipating the possibility in a healthcare system that's decomposing and totally unable to care for us now, and massive additional load looking after people with early dementia and heart failure. Now, look, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, never was. I've had every vax that there is. But COVID has revealed the dark underbelly of the relationship between CDC and Big Pharma, the revolving door. Your listeners may be surprised to hear that the godfather of vaccinology wrote the standard text, Dr. Plotkin, has said, quote, "There has never been a usual clinical trial for any vaccine." He said that publicly.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that bother me about all this, doctor, is the statistics have been out for a long time talking about the dangers of the vax, and particularly talking about the dangers of the vax for children.
Mhm.
And yet we're still vaccinating children and encouraging the vaccination of children, even the children that are just born.
Mhm.
And the statistic is also out that this is hurting the reproduction area of our children. And for example, a female child, when they are born, have all the eggs in their body that they're going to have for the rest of their life. And
Right.
and we also know that the birth rate of 2023 in Canada was the lowest it's ever been since they've been keeping records. And we know that worldwide, the birth rate going around the world is staggeringly low. And we know the report that came out with Dr. Davidson in Alberta recommending that we stop vaccinating children. And that report came out, what, 6 months ago, 4 months ago?
Mhm.
And my understanding is we're still vaccinating children.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
what is going on? I don't get it. I thought
It's
doctors and medical people were smart. And it's like,
it's
it doesn't sound like smartness to me. It sounds like dumb and hidden agenda. That's what it sounds like to me.
it's catastrophic. We do know from the Pfizer clinical trial in Japan that was reporting on rats and the vax. We do know, thanks to Dr. Byron Bridle, who got it out of Pfizer, given the Freedom of Information request in Japan. We do know that the ovaries are one of the prime attack sites for the vax and the adrenals, prime targets. And as you said correctly, Alan, little girls are born with all the eggs they're ever going to have. It's not like spermatozoa that are constantly being produced. If you knock off eggs in a child's, a baby, a girl's ovaries, they're gone forever. Now, that may well be one of the contributing factors to the decline in live births internationally. But remember, that was happening before COVID. What COVID vaccination, remember, it's gone into the arms, the bodies of the majority of the world's population, not just little girls, but women in reproductive age. It's highly likely, in our opinion, that that attack will accelerate the already declining fertility globally. And to put a number on that, all those Armageddon projections of the world's population exploding that's evaporated. The world's population is now stabilizing and will shortly be contracting. It's only Africa that has a replacement rate above what's needed to maintain a population. The entire Western world is going down the drain. Short of immigration, population in every country will decline. That means societal values change. It means a reduced economic base, fewer people to sell to, fewer people to work. We don't know what the other reasons for the decline in fertility are. There are many theories that we could get into, but attacking the ovaries and attacking the testes with attack on the spermatozoa, that's certainly not going to help get above replacement rate. Let me be very clear. This is an attack on humanity, not just in terms of fertility, but in terms of reverse transcription and potentially subject to proof, which is highly likely in 6 months from Dr. Speaker, a permanent change in the human genome with consequences that we do not know. That is a staggering statement, all for essentially no reason, nothing other than essentially a bad seasonal flu. Never was a pandemic. There was no need for emergency authorization. A pandemic is described as something that's global that kills a lot of people. Well, guess what? There was no excess mortality before the vax was introduced. It was not killing people in increasing numbers. It did not happen. Yes, there were some tragic events in New York with ventilators and in Britain with remdesivir and midazolam, killing people almost intentionally. Yes, those were isolated areas where an increased mortality took place. But in the absence of those interventions, COVID-19 virus did not kill excessive numbers of people. The life insurance industry relies upon accurate stats, and that's what they stated.
I want to ask you this. Oh, go ahead, Alan. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to mention we got 7 minutes left in our interview, and you are starting something new in your company, offering to people that they would be interested, that has to do with their health. And maybe we should get that in before we carry on with any kind of discussion, so that that at least gets out for people who need the kind of help that you're going to provide.
That's very kind of you to allow me to just speak to that briefly. We have started a service called Malpractice Check, which is a direct-to-patient service providing a medical opinion, not legal, on whether or not a vaccine injury or medical malpractice has taken place. We have a website that people could visit, which is Malpractice Check, one word, malpracticecheck.ca. And people might find that very interesting to cruise.
So what you're saying is that if they feel that they have an injury because of a vax or whatever, they give you a call. And is there a cost to it?
Yes, it's $790 Canadian and an equivalent amount in the States. We're marketing this transcontinentally because social media knows no boundaries. The report is about a 30 to 40 page report, which consists of a transcribed interview from a professional interviewer, a chronology of documentation that individuals provide, and then a 4-page or 5-page report from an expert addressing the particular questions that are being posed.
Perfect.
Okay. Dr. Roger, I got a question. We were blind before COVID. I think a lot of people were. Now, years later, the truth is coming out. The ex-CDC director, out of his own mouth, we've seen a lot of the Pfizer dump, the Pfizer papers. Doctors are speaking out. We've got stats. We've got, all this kind of evidence now. How do we, and we have damaged people, people that have been injured. and some of it lifelong effects. How do we turn this ship around? How do we get this to change? How do we, get the bullies who are not responsible? You can't sue them because they're protected. Like we see all this evidence. How do we get this ship turned around to get back to, healing people once again? And where do you see that going? How do we do that?
You can't fight an enemy that's invisible. One of the benefits, if you like, I'm not trying to be facetious here. One of the benefits of COVID has been revealing the utter corruption of every institution we always implicitly trusted, including physicians. That's a starting point to realize who the enemy is. With respect to medicine, I think the direction will come from the states. RFK and Jay Bhattacharya at NIH are going to lead the charge to reform the way Big Pharma does trials and gets approved. There will no longer be a pirouette from the director of the CDC onto the board of Pfizer for the pension that compensates them for passing through products that they know were not effective or even dangerous. That's going to be an incredible starting point, because whatever happens down in the States with the FDA and the CDC will inevitably have an impact on Canada and the way Health Canada does or does not manage similar issues. That's on the medical side. On the political side, clearly the corruption is so rampant that tinkering is not going to help. You can only change all those institutions for the good by taking control of the legislation that is involved in regulating them. By that I mean subtext, an independent Alberta. We will never achieve that degree of correction of the major institutions nationally for all the reasons that have been well explained. We need to take control locally and burn the institutions down to the studs and remake Alberta along traditional democratic lines, with the family as the central element in what we are trying to succeed.
I think Alan and I would agree with that.
Yeah, maybe put God first and then family. But
that's the only change. Well, yeah, we appreciate your wisdom. I wish the nation would have listened to you at the very beginning. The outcome would have been a lot different. But we are where we are now, and our eyes are open. We've seen the bullying. We've seen the punishment. We've seen the process is the punishment. We've seen the emergency acts, and how they're being misused in order to control. And we see it now. And so we always believe that God is in control, that God had to show us really how evil really can be evil. And now our prayer is that we move into the future, helping people that have been injured and mistrusted. And I know God's getting the information out. He's using your voice as well. We're so grateful for you and thankful that you're here on the show.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's always good to have Dr. Roger on. Like I said, he was one of the lone voices at the very, very beginning. I do wish the nation would have listened and people would have paid attention. But Alan, we are where we are. And I think you had a verse about, can you read that verse that you read the other day? I think it was in Peter.
Yeah. 1 Peter chapter 1, starting in verse 5 says, now being protected by God's power through faith for a salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time, you rejoice in this, though now for a short time you have had to struggle in various trials, so that the genuineness of your faith, more valuable than gold, which perishes though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Now it says, for a short time you may have to endure various trials, but these trials serve a purpose. It says, so that the genuineness of your faith, more valuable than gold, which perishes though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Now, the key word here is genuineness. Because if there is a genuine faith, then there is also a false faith. And it's possible to have a counterfeit faith instead of a real one. Absolutely, that's possible.
Yeah.
Just as there is truth, there is also deception. So how can we know whether our faith is real or false? The answer lies in trials. It is not just one type of hardship, but a variety of challenges that test and refine us, revealing the true nature of our faith.
That right there. I think that's what we're in right now.
Yep.
I think that's what we're facing right now.
Yeah, because,
it's for our good. It's for our good. There's a good at the end of that, but it's
interesting. Just one, little thought. Trials and trails have the same letters. Yet with one small adjustment, their meaning shifts completely. In life, we may choose the trail we walk, but we don't usually choose the trials we face. Consider Job. He didn't choose his suffering. God allowed it for a greater purpose.
Yeah.
Likewise, our trials are not random. They are a part of God's refining process, proving the authenticity of our faith and preparing us for his glory.
Oof, I'm going to leave it right there. Absolutely love that. You want to help support our mission? You can. We are viewer supported. You can go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on the donate button. Many different ways you can help support what we're doing here on Talk Truth. Digitally, you can do it that way at gotalktruth.com on donate. If you'd like to do it through the mail, you can. If you'd like to make the check payable to Heritage Christian Ministries Association, and send it to 246 Stewart Green, Southwest Suite 3260, Calgary, Alberta, T3H 3C8. And you can also donate on our toll-free number or get prayer if you need prayer. That's why it's there. 1-800-915-0056 in Canada, 1-800-445-3450 in the U.S. All right, Dad, we're out of time. We'll see you guys later.
Love you.